Welcome to Jazz Piano Skills. I'm Dr. Bob Lawrence. It's time to discover, learn, and play jazz piano. Well, I hope everyone had a good weekend and is fully recovered from the holidays and knocked it out of the park last week with our harmonic analysis of Fly Me to the Moon. Such a great tune for developing essential jazz piano skills, like the essential harmonic skills that we dissected last week are form, changes, harmonic function, common harmonic movement, voicings, and of course the essential melodic skills that we're going to examine today: lyrics, melody, fingerings, phrases, melodic treatments, and of course the essential improvisation skills that we're going to tackle next week, plus the essential rhythmic skills we are doing every week. And speaking of rhythmic skills, I hope everyone enjoyed our first rhythm challenge last week. I received a ton of feedback and saw some great comments and contributions to our online community, which fires me up and makes me extremely excited to unveil the rhythmic challenge for this week. This is going to be a ton of fun this year, and even more importantly, provide a huge musical and jazz growth for everyone who's courageous enough to take the plunge each week to embrace the challenge. More on all of this a little later in the episode, but I received wonderful input regarding the rhythm scales, and I'm glad that's going to work out. Now, likewise, I received some great input from y'all regarding the 7 facts of music that I presented last week as well. And in case you didn't listen to last week's podcast episode or just simply need a quick refresher, here are the musical facts that are going to govern everything we do this year. Not only this year, but beyond this year. Here they are. Musical fact number 1, music is the production of sound, right? Major, dominant, minor, half diminished, diminished. Number 2, sound is produced harmonically or melodically, right? And number 3, when produced harmonically, we are playing chords, voicings. Fact number 4, when produced melodically, we are playing scales and or arpeggios. Fact number 5, when playing scales and arpeggios, we are moving in one of 2 directions. We can only go up or down. That's it. Fact number 6, we camouflage scales and arpeggios with tension. Those are notes that fall outside of the key center. And fact number 7, to make musical facts 1 through 6 interesting, we add rhythm. That's it, man. Those are the musical facts. The 7 musical facts. That's it. Regardless of genre. Again, we're sitting here talking jazz, but it makes no difference. Classical music, rock, country, I don't care, right? These are the 7 facts of music, period. The key words: sound, harmony, melody, chords, scales, arpeggios, up, down, tension, rhythm. I love that. Right? How many? What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 words. Sound, harmony, melody, chords, scales, arpeggios, up, down, tension, rhythm. Music. Boom, bang. That's it. Now, these 7 musical facts that you must come to know, you must etch them into your mind, because our daily, our weekly, our monthly, our yearly practice agenda needs to reflect these 7 musical facts. Everything we study, everything we practice, we should be able to plug into these 7 musical facts. And if we cannot do that, then the bad news is you're wasting valuable time thinking that you're practicing when you really are not. That is a bummer. And that is precisely why we approach our tune study at Jazz Piano Skills centering around the 7 facts of music using 3 distinct tune learning phases. We have a harmonic analysis, a melodic analysis, and improvisation development, right? And this year, as I announced last week, we're adding an emphasis to each of these phases, which focuses specifically on fact number 7, rhythm. Now, again, each phase moving forward incorporates a rhythm challenge that will be posted in the private Jazz Piano Skills community in our forums. The harmonic rhythm challenge, week 1, involved rhythmic transcribing and comping skills, right? This week with the melodic rhythm challenge, week 2, we focus on transposing, right? Transposing melodic ideas to various key centers. And then with our improvisation rhythmic challenge next week, week 3, we stretch our arpeggio and scale motion through various segments of the sound, thus transforming our soloing by increasing our vocabulary, right? This is why, more than ever, I'm excited about this year and what we have planned. We have an amazing, educationally sound, 3-tier, 3-phase approach that is formulated from a very clear understanding of the 7 facts of music. The 7 facts needed to illuminate essential jazz piano skills, right? To successfully discover, learn, and play tunes. To successfully discover, learn, and play jazz. So this is going to be a phenomenal year. So today we begin our melodic analysis of the classic jazz standard that we introduced last week, Fly Me to the Moon. So today we discover Fly Me to the Moon. We learn the melody by ear. We're going to transcribe that melody. We're going to look at the phrases and the target notes for Fly Me to the Moon. And of course, we're going to play Fly Me to the Moon using 3 standard jazz treatments. And of course, you're going to be given a rhythm challenge to develop your transposing skills. So, as I always like to say, regardless of where you are in your jazz journey, a beginner, an intermediate player, an advanced player, or even if you're a seasoned and experienced pro, you know what? You're going to find this Jazz Piano Skills podcast lesson, exploring Fly Me to the Moon, to be very beneficial. But before we get started, I want to, as I always do, welcome first-time listeners to Jazz Piano Skills. If you're new to Jazz Piano Skills, new to the Jazz Piano Skills podcast, then welcome. I want to personally invite you to become a Jazz Piano Skills member. And your membership will grant you many perks. Number 1, you will have access to premium podcast content. In other words, the entire podcast episode. The first half of every Jazz Piano Skills podcast episode is free for everyone. We explore the question of the week. We lay out the educational agenda, the lesson rationale. That's all free for everyone to enjoy. The second half of the podcast, however, is for members only. We dive into the lesson content. We have the educational demonstrations, and of course now the weekly assignment as well. You also, as a member, have access to the podcast packets, and these are designed and developed for each weekly podcast episode. These are the illustrations, the lead sheets, and the play-alongs. This is educational material that I developed to help you get the most out of every podcast episode. You should absolutely have them in your hands when listening, and of course sitting on your piano when practicing as well. As a member, you also have access to the online courses. These are comprehensive, interactive, self-paced, and sequential courses that contain interactive learning media that helps you digest the jazz piano skills conceptually so that you have a shot at developing them physically. There are video demonstrations of those skills in all 12 keys, so the courses are very beneficial. You also, as a member, have access to the online weekly masterclasses, which I host every week, every Thursday evening, 8 p.m. Central Time. And if you can't make it, it's no big deal. As a member, these masterclasses are recorded, and you can listen and re-listen to the recordings of the classes as often as you wish. And you also have access to the private jazz piano online community, right, where we host a variety of forums. There are episode-specific forums and, of course, general jazz forums as well. It's a great place to meet friends and check out the various questions and answers, feedback and assistance. It's wonderful. And last, certainly not least, as a Jazz Piano Skills member, you have access to unlimited educational support. This is private, personal, and professional educational support as often as you wish. You can access the support through the SpeakPipe widget. There's a web form, my office number here at the Dallas School of Music, and of course, email as well. All of these amazing privileges, these perks are waiting to help you discover, learn, and play jazz piano. So check it all out at jazzpianoskills.com and, of course, become a member and begin enjoying premium podcast content and all of the other perks that I just mentioned. Of course, if you get to the website, poking around, have some questions, do not hesitate to contact me. I'm always happy to spend some time with you, help you in any way that I can, and answer all of your questions. All right. Well, speaking of questions, it's on to our question of the week. Okay, so this question of the week for this week comes from Pat Stevenson, living in Lexington, Kentucky. And Pat writes, "We had our first rhythm challenge last week, and I must admit, initially I thought it would be easy. And I must admit as well, I was wrong. I found transcribing the rhythm to be very difficult, and I'm not sure why. I'm looking forward to developing my rhythm understanding and playing, but I am not off to a good start. What tips can you give to help a stunned and rhythm-shocked newbie? I don't want to suck at this." Okay. Well, Pat, all right. Well, listen, man. You might suck at it now, but you won't suck at it by the end of the year. And you know what? I got to be honest. Congrats for having the courage to openly admit that something is kicking your butt. Because honestly, that's the very first step of getting better at any skill, is having the guts to say, dang, man, I suck at this. Right now, you know what? With that being said, I promise you that you did not do as poorly as you think you did. We all have this tendency to be a little harsh on the negative side when it comes to accurately assessing our own skills, which again is good, especially if we want to get better. However, we don't want to let it discourage us to the point that we just throw up our hands and we give up. And obviously, this is not the case for you, Pat, because you took the time to write and submit your question looking for some insight, for some tips to help you gain a command of rhythmic transcribing, which is not easy. So here are a few tips that I would suggest. I would suggest keeping these in mind when we tackle this skill again next month with a new tune. Okay? So tip number one. You ready? Tip number one. Listen, listen, listen. Listen for what? Well, listen for counts 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, I know this may sound like I'm stating the obvious, but it has to be said out loud, right? The question needs to be asked. Do you hear count 1, count 2, count 3, count 4 of every measure? Can you clap on the downbeat of each measure? All right. Now, if the answer is yes, then you're ready for tip 2. If you cannot, then I would stay put and practice hearing and practice clapping counts 1, 2, 3, 4. That's tip number 1, and it's huge. Okay? Don't move on until you can do that. Tip number 2. Listen, listen, Listen. Listen for what? Listen for the upbeats of counts 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, this is not so obvious, but the question needs to be asked. Do you hear the upbeats of counts 1, 2, 3, and 4? In other words, can you clap on the upbeat of each measure? Think of it this way. There is a downbeat and an upbeat for counts 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you can clap upbeats, then you are ready for tip 3. And if you cannot, I would stay put and practice hearing and clapping the upbeats of each count. Counts 1, 2, 3, and 4. So tip 1, clapping the downbeats. Tip number 2, clapping the upbeats. Tip number 3, pay careful attention to what is happening on counts 1 and 2, and then what is happening on counts 3 and 4. In other words, subdivide the measure. Instead of thinking of all 4 beats at once, begin hearing the first half of the measure, counts 1 and 2, and then begin hearing the second half of the measure, counts 3 and 4. Now, it's interesting. Music is typically written in this way, this manner as well, right? As if there's like this invisible bar line splitting the measure in half. The first half of the measure counts 1 and 2. The second half of the measure count 3 and 4. Okay? Tip number 4. Nail your downbeats first, right? So ask yourself the question, is there something being played, physically being played on count 1? If so, mark it on your staff paper, your notebook paper, your candy bar wrapper, whatever you're using to sketch out the rhythm. Makes no difference, right? Just mark it. Count 1, boom, there's something happening. Is there something happening on count 2? If so, mark it. So we've got the first half of the measure taken care of. Something happening on count 1, something happening on count 2. Now turn your attention to the second half of the measure. Is there something happening on count 3? If so, mark it. Something happening on count 4? Again, if so, mark it. Okay? Tip number 5. Do the same process for the upbeats of each downbeat, right? So is there something happening on the upbeat of count 1? If so, mark it. Is something happening on the upbeat of beat 2 or count 2? If so, mark it. So now we got the first half of the measure taken care of. Turn your attention to the second half of the measure. Something happening on the upbeat of count 3, mark it. Something happening on the upbeat of count 4, mark it. Okay? Tip number 6. Practice clapping dotted rhythms, especially the dotted quarter note, eighth note combination and the dotted eighth note, 16th note combinations. Now, I promise you, if you get comfy with tips 1 through 5, you're going to be able to rhythmically transcribe 90+% of all melodies you hear. Tips 1 through 5, 90+% of all melodies you hear. If you get comfy with tip 6, the dotted rhythms, right, you're golden. You will be able to rhythmically transcribe everything you hear. I say everything, maybe some weird piece of music, I don't know. Everything that I play, everything that I hear, right? So tips number 1 through 5 absolutely will set the pace for you, 90+% of all melodies you hear. You add tip number 6, you're good to go. So, Pat, great question. And as always, if more clarification is needed or if you want to dive deeper, do not hesitate to reach out to me, right? This is a very quick overview on how to improve your rhythmic transcribing skills. So I'm always happy to spend some additional time with you if needed and help you in any way that I can. All right, let's get busy, right? Let's discover, learn, and play jazz piano. Let's discover, learn, and play Fly Me to the Moon. a melodic analysis. When studying, when learning any tune, I approach it the same way. And again, you're going to get tired of hearing me say it, but I'm going to say it. Genre makes no difference. It doesn't matter what kind of song it is, a jazz tune, rock tune, pop, country, folk, R&B, right? I go about it the same way. And here's how I go about it. I listen, of course, various artists, vocalists, instrumentalists, pianists, and from various genres. I don't just listen to jazz musicians, right? Anyone performing Fly Me to the Moon, I want to check it out. Number two, I always turn my attention to doing a harmonic analysis, just like we did last week, where I'm looking at the form of the piece, the changes, the function, common movement, voicings, and of course, rhythm. Then I turn my attention to a melodic analysis like we're going to do today. I transcribe the melody. I don't read it from a fake book. I don't buy a piece of sheet music, right? I poke it out. I sit at the piano and I poke it out. I transcribe it, right? I look at phrases. I look at target notes. I explore various treatments of the tune, standard treatments like a ballad, bossa, and swing, and of course, rhythm. And then finally, I'll turn my attention to improvisational development, where I look at the chord scale relationships, arpeggio scale movement through the sounds, tension notes, right? And of course, rhythm. And it's pretty thorough. It's a pretty complete approach. It's organized, it's structured, it remains the same, it's constant, that I can move from tune to tune to tune to tune. So important. So, this week's melodic analysis will have us, of course, listening, and we will then turn our attention to transcribing the melody and our phrases and our target notes and our various treatments. Next week, we'll focus on part 3, which is the improvisation development. So the educational agenda for today is as follows. Number 1, we are going to listen to definitive recordings of Fly Me to the Moon. Number 2, we will learn the melody, as I just mentioned, by ear, transcribing the melody for Fly Me to the Moon. Number 3, we will discover, learn, and play my suggested fingerings for playing the melody so that you can articulate it with a proper and authentic jazz articulation. Number 4, we will identify the melodic phrases of the melody for Fly Me to the Moon. Number 5, we will apply the voicings, the left-hand shell voicings from last week. We will apply those voicings to the melody for Fly Me to the Moon. And then finally, number 6, we will apply the 3 standard jazz treatments, the ballad, the bossa, and the swing treatment to Fly Me to the Moon. So as always, a lot to get done. And if you are a Jazz Piano Skills member, I want you to hit the pause button right now. Take a few minutes to download and print your podcast packets. Again, these are the illustrations, the lead sheets, and play-alongs. And again, your membership grants you access to the premium content and, of course, the podcast packets. So for every weekly podcast episode. So as I mentioned earlier, you should have these in your hands when listening to the podcast to get the most out of it. And, of course, you should have them sitting on your piano when practicing as well. Okay, so now that you have your podcast packets in front of you, I want you to grab your lead sheets, as always, right? Grab your lead sheets, and you should have 6 lead sheets in your packet, 6 lead sheets. I just want to walk you through them quickly before we do a deep dive. So lead sheet 1, scale 1, you can see this is what I call a fill-in-the-blank ear training exercise. Fill-in-the-blank ear training exercise. So we have Fly Me to the Moon here. I have some guide tones, if you will, to help you navigate through transcribing the melody successfully. Okay, so it truly is a fill-in-the-blank exercise. We have the guide tones. There's melody happening in between those guide tones. I want you to sit at the piano and poke that melody out and fill in the blanks. Okay, doesn't have to be fancy musical notation. However you need to do it. We're just trying to, at the end, have something notated there that when you play it, you go, hey, That's Fly Me to the Moon. All right, that's lead sheet number 1. Lead sheet number 2 is a melodic lead sheet of the melody of Fly Me to the Moon. So you can basically check your work, right? You can check your work and can see how well you did. Lead sheet number 3 has the fingerings notated that I suggest using when playing the melody of Fly Me to the Moon to give you the optimal chance of being able to articulate the melody in a idiomatically jazz correct way. Okay. Lead sheet number 4 identifies the various phrases that are found within the melody of Fly Me to the Moon. Lead sheet 5, we zero in on those phrases and the target notes that you need to be aware of within those phrases for Fly Me to the Moon. And then, of course, lead sheet 6 takes the left-hand shell voicings that we explored last week with our harmonic analysis, and we drop the melody in on top of those voicings to hear how the melody and the harmony or the voicing sound together. So it's a wonderful packet. Again, we have a ton to get through today, so let's get after this thing. Now, typically at this time, I would play a definitive recording of the tune, right? But just as I did last week, I have decided to place the listening suggestions in the Jazz Piano Skills community forums. And again, there are a couple of reasons for this. Number one, I want to be able to suggest more than one tune to check out. Okay. And number two, I want to preserve as much time as possible for the educational content of this podcast. So right now, again, hit the pause button. I want you to head over to the community and I want you to spend some time just listening to the few selections that I have made of folks, instrumentalists performing Fly Me to the Moon. Okay. And once you have listened to the recommended recordings, then I want you to grab your lead sheets, all 6, right? And we'll start with lead sheet 1. Okay. Lead sheet 1, fill in the blanks. Here are a few thoughts to keep in mind. Thank you for listening to Jazz Piano Skills. The remaining premium content of this episode is available to Jazz Piano Skills members at jazzpianoskillspodcast.com. Visit jazzpianoskills.com to learn more about membership privileges and become a Jazz Piano Skills member. Thank you.